Good morning. This is the September 15th meeting of the Glyphosate Commission. We're going to give it a few moments for people to be admitted to this Zoom platform, but we're going to get started momentarily. This is, as I noted, the September 15th meeting of the Glyphosate Commission. My first duty is to make sure that we have a quorum present, so I'm going to call the roll. John LeBeau, Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Nascarella, Chief Toxicologist of the Massachusetts DPH, representing Commissioner Margaret Cook.
Present.
Thank you. Eve Schleuder, Assistant Director of the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, Mass Wildlife, representing Director TISA.
Present.
Thank you. And Julie Richburg, Lead Ecologist in Natural Resources, the Trustees of Reservation.
Present. Good morning, all. Good
morning. So we have full attendance and we therefore have a quorum. Thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of June 17th, 2022. Before I seek a motion for approval, I'll ask if there are any comments on those draft minutes. Not hearing any. I will move for adoption of the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBeau. So at this point, I'll offer one more opportunity for questions or comments. Not hearing any. I will ask. I will call the roll on the meeting minutes. Commissioner LeBeau.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Nascarella.
Aye.
Eve Schleuder.
Aye.
And Julie Richburg.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much. So today we are going to we're going to work to accomplish a few things. First of all, we plan on discussing finalizing phase 1 of the report prepared by ERG and discuss the Commission's path forward, including the phase 2 report and its implementation. So as we begin, we are mindful of the fact that we did have an initial deadline of December 31st, 2021. As the Commission members know, and as we reported in our previous Commission meetings, it proved to be difficult to achieve that deadline given the logistical issues we were confronting, including retaining a consultant to help us analyze the information that the Commission would need to consider. We also had contractual issues. When we first went out to bid, we found that the bidding on that short timeline did not yield any responses, so we had to rebid. We were able to get a successful bidder in the rebid. Along the way, we've been, attempting to make sure, and we'll talk later about making sure that we had a reliable source of funding to get us through phase 2. We are going to be, we're going to be talking not only about the work we move forward, but potentially adopting a new deadline. In the course of the process, I know we've tried to stay engaged with the bill sponsor, Rep. Gentile, to let him know of our progress and our work and, the need to adjust the schedule. And we've appreciated his input in this process. We also completed, with the funding we had, we completed draft phase 1. Our contractor, ERG, completed a draft phase 1. At the last meeting, there was a request for additional opportunity for public comment, which we provided. We posted phase 1 on the website and made sure that people had an opportunity to comment on phase 1. And we received public comment, and we will shortly discuss the comments received and any potential changes as a result of those comments. We will also, after we get through, discussing phase one, we will be talking about the schedule for phase two. ERG has advised that they will need 6 months from the start of the work on phase two in order to complete it properly. And, we will also need to, reflect other issues. We heard at our last meeting from, I think, a number of commenters that it would be helpful to know how comments in the next phase of the process would be dealt with. So, we asked ERG to give us an additional information on what it would cost to address comments received during the completion of phase two as well. And I understand ERG is prepared to do that. So I might pause here and ask ERG to talk a little bit about the timeline. And what the expectations are, what they think they would need to accomplish this in as timely a manner as possible, but ensuring that they would be able to do the type of job I think the commission members would expect them to do. I will note that we will have opportunities. There are certain questions that ERG posed for us that might, that we're going to ask the commission members to consider, but I'm just asking whether ERG has any initial comments about the timing of the contract. And John Wilhelmi, if you had anything you wanted to offer at this time, I'd ask you to speak to the commission. Paul, are you able to unmute John?
Yes, getting there. Where are you? There you go. There you go, John.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner Suberg. And what you reported is consistent with what I had mentioned previously about the schedule. After phase one, I checked with our internal team members about the duration of phase two. And our original proposal called for 4 months for that. And seeing that there will be the public input process, as well as the opportunity for the public to comment on the draft report, we want to make sure we allot time to consider what information we'll receive during those phases. So I think sticking with the 6 months from the point we can get started on phase two is indeed where we stand right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know whether or not, as I've indicated, this will mean that as we move forward, we will need to amend the contract we have with ERG. This is something that DEP and DAR have been working on to both make sure that we have the sources of funding in place, even as we seek legislative support for the full amount. As you know, we were allocated 50,000. The study is going to be more than that, and we've been engaging, in the administration with the legislature to see if we can be reimbursed. But in the meantime, move forward using existing sources of funding to get the work done. Commissioner LeBeau, I'd either open the floor to you now or maybe later when we talk about adopting phase two. I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there were any preliminary remarks you wanted to address.
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. In that case, I might turn to our agenda item, agenda item 4, which is the phase one report comments. And I will note that we did the commission solicited public comment on the phase one report at the June commission meeting. All public comments received have been posted on the commission's website. Members of the commission have received, and we posted publicly, a letter from ERG summarizing the public input, which has also been posted to the commission's website. And we'll now take a few moments to review the public comments, which were summarized in ERG's letter. So unless there are any clarifying questions from the commission members, I will go ahead and review the comments we received.
Commissioner, just one question. If we would like to comment on particular items, would you prefer we interrupt you point by point, or we wait till you go through the whole letter?
Well, what I'm planning to do is we have a number of topics like public input, usage data, considering precedential judicial decisions, inert ingredients, where I'm going to sort of break it down topic by topic and then invite the commission to react, because in some of these areas, ERG is in fact asking, how does the commission want to proceed? So I think if it's okay, what I'll do is I'll summarize the topic, the comments we received, and then I'll open it for commission discussion on each of the four major topics I think we got comments on.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So the first one is public input, and a number of commenters suggested that additional stakeholders be consulted as the commission's work progresses to phase 2. As a result, ERG recommends stakeholder input starting at the beginning of phase 2 by soliciting feedback on topics that will be addressed in phase 2. Expanding the list of stakeholders to not only include those in the phase 1 report, but also those identified in the phase 1 comments, and soliciting public comments on the draft phase 2 when it is developed by ERG and available. That means posting phase 2 report, the draft phase 2 to the website and considering all public comments submitted. ERG would correct any errors identified by comments and compile all comments to be included in the report as an appendix. This approach, ERG notes, could be accomplished within the current budget. I'll ask first whether or not ERG has anything to add to these recommendations.
This is John. No, I don't. And one thing I did want to point out is I don't want this letter to imply that this is all that we saw in the public comments. We're taking to heart the many other topics that were raised and suggestions for corrections. This is just a list of the items for which we specifically sought the commission's input. But I don't have anything further to add on the topics about public input and comment.
Okay. So do commission members have any thoughts, recommendations, questions about ERG's recommendations for addressing phase 2?
Commissioner?
Yes, Commissioner, go ahead.
So relative to, referencing the letter, relative to item 1A, allow for stakeholders to provide input at the beginning of phase 2, we're certainly agreeable and supportive to that. We would simply, we understand the process. We announced that, there's an open comment period. However, we would suggest that in addition to that, those stakeholders that were identified in the phase 1 report specifically be contacted and reached out to, that this comment period is being initiated. We think we jointly identified organizations and individuals from which we really would like to seek their thoughts. So I just didn't want inadvertently for some of those folks to not be aware, and that we missed that opportunity.
So thank you for that. And let me just make sure that I'm saying this correctly and as a summary. What you're suggesting as either an addendum to the phase 2 is that there is affirmative outreach to phase 1 commenters, whatever means email, whatever. So they are aware that we are now in phase 2.
Well, I'm not quite sure if I'm saying that about the phase 1 commenters, but we had a list of stakeholders, I believe, and by we, I mean us jointly, not MDR, that there were a list of stakeholders that were identified as those from whom input would be appreciated. So it was that group that I was suggesting be affirmatively contacted. Others might feel that that should be expanded further as you have stated.
Important point, and my apologies. So the specific recommendation is, specifically geared towards making re-engaging with stakeholders that we identified earlier in this process. And obviously other people were commenting. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, right. We want to specifically let the listed stakeholders know that there is this new public comment period.
Okay. Other commission comments on this topic?
Commissioner,
Yes, Julie.
just to follow up on that, that would include the kind of affirmative outreach would include stakeholders, not just in the original draft phase 1 report, but would also include those stakeholders that have been brought forth by the comments that we've received. So that would be an expanded list.
Okay. So additional stakeholders identified by the comments.
Yes.
Okay. I might just see if there are any other comments.
I think that's a very reasonable suggestion that Julie made.
Mm-hmm. Eve, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I'm also wondering exactly how it's going to be noticed and make sure that there's enough advertisement, if you will, or inclusion in that respect. And so making some sort of plan for that in terms of notification in different arenas like the environmental monitor and so forth. So
okay. Mark, I noticed you unmuted yourself. I didn't know if you had a comment you wanted to offer.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I think one question I had, it wasn't clear from item 1, really C, which looks like it's the preferred approach, is the extent to which response to comments would be characterized in the phase 2 report. And I understand from what they've provided, they are not advocating for responding to every comment individually. I can see how that would be cost prohibitive. But I think some section of the report that maybe is even formatted similar to this memo itself that characterized themes that were responded to would be helpful. And I think it would help defend against future criticism that X or Y was not thoughtfully considered, where maybe they don't have to go through it in detail if the comments weren't incorporated, but just some way to document that we recognize these were criticisms. And generally, this is our response to these criticisms.
Okay. And appreciate that. So, sort of major areas or themes of comment. And, in addition to including all the comments in the appendix of the report. So,
right, Commissioner.
Great. So I might, again, given Eve's question, I might ask if John Wilhelmi has any thoughts, or some of this may be work that you were already anticipating doing, but I'm going to ask you for a comment, because what you've heard is active engagement with the stakeholders, so they know we're in phase 2, and not only the original stakeholders but other stakeholders identified in the public comment period. And then the second is that the report acknowledge sort of major themes of comment heard and obtained during this comment process. So John, if I just, for the benefit of the commission members, I'm sure you've been anticipating these types of issues. If there's anything you'd like to offer.
I think that's perfectly sensible, everything that's been said. And for reference, what I guess technically still is our draft phase 1 report lists about 24 stakeholders, and we would add to that list every additional stakeholder that's been referenced in the public comments. So that might double the list approximately. So we have absolutely no problem doing that. And I support reaching out to them to notify them of the public input point, as well as when they could provide public comments. And I'm also quite on board with having something in our final report for phase 2 that responds to general themes in the comments, but isn't necessarily a one-by-one response to every comment received.
Okay, thank you for that. And the only other thing is, obviously, assuming we get concurrence as we go through this and we're approving phase 2, negotiating. But one thing, you will be working with our staffs to finalize this. But one thing is, when I'd encourage a couple of different ways of outreach to the stakeholders, whether it's email blast or I think you heard Eve's suggestion that maybe even posting something in the monitor that it's just more than one, so that we really get the benefit of those stakeholders' views that we're hoping to get.
Understood.
Okay. What I would propose to do is we'll go through these topics, and then we'll take votes on what we want to do with both finalizing phase 1 and authorizing the work to begin on phase 2. So I'm keeping notes here, and I'm hoping that Ann Lowry's helping me keep notes so that we have an accurate vote at the end of this. But I think it might be helpful to go through the other topics as well. So the next topic that I think we got comments on that ERG highlighted is the pesticide applicator annual usage data. Some commenters suggested in the phase 1 report, ERG compiled usage quantities from paper reports that are submitted to DAR annually by licensed applicators. ERG has indicated that given the current scope of work and time and cost involved, this approach is not feasible. ERG noted in its letter that Appendix 1 through 4 of EPA's 2021 biological evaluation for glyphosate presents detailed glyphosate usage information, including breakdowns by states and regions. The usage information is based on the kinetic database referenced in one of the public comments and other resources. It also includes breakdowns by various agricultural and non-agricultural uses. ERG also noted that state level usage data from the kinetic database, which may potentially be gleaned from EPA reports, could potentially be relied on by ERG. Accordingly, ERG has recommended to the Commission that first, it would welcome MDAR's comments on what insights, if any, can be gleaned from the MDAR forms. The Commission discussed proceeding without extracting usage data from those paper forms at MDAR, and 3, consider directing ERG to consider the information regarding state and sector use of glyphosate from the EPA 2021 report. I'm going to ask first, ERG, if you have anything further you'd like to state, to amplify or fill out these recommendations or questions.
Not really. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage to comment on how the ease with which we could summarize what's in the hard copy annual reports, because I've never seen them. So that is the reason why I suggested to get the input from MDAR on that topic.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know if MDAR, Commissioner, or anybody on your team has any comments they'd like to offer on that.
Sure. At least I'll make initial comments, and possibly Taryn or other members of the staff might want to embolden them or clarify them. But just to understand from everyone, just to make sure everyone understands what we do and what we're looking at. We receive somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 use reports annually. Now, what those reports include is the following: the product name, the EPA registration number. They indicate the crop and not the geographical location, but the crop and the site. For instance, corn in a field or ornamental plants in a greenhouse. It indicates the application method and the amount used. The report does not include the active ingredient. So that would require ERG to determine which of the products in those reports actually contain glyphosate as a review is made. Now, certainly there'd be some use to that information, but it should be noted that these reports are submitted by licensed individuals. So it does not at all include use by the general public and all of the agricultural uses. So I want folks to understand that what we receive in these reports is not it's not the total universe of use. And then, yes, they're in paper form. We simply haven't had the resources to digitize the reports. We've, over the past 7.5 years, we've digitized a lot of things in our pesticide program as resources become available to us, and we get that support. And certainly in this area, nothing would make us happier than to have the ability to receive these reports in a digital fashion. And it's an item that we're constantly working on. But the fact of the matter is, they come to us in paper, and until and unless we have resources to make that conversion, that's how it's going to continue. And it's a little, I wanted to make sure everyone understood exactly what those reports contain.
Thank you, Commissioner. One question: does DAR have you considered the recommendations by ERG? Is there anything that you want to offer about either the EPA reports and the kinetic database?
Well, that's not something that I feel prepared to respond to. Taryn, what do we think about that, truthfully?
I think any information is going to be helpful. I think we just need to make sure and caveat any of the missing links that information might have. Just like the commissioner had noted, our information that we collect is only for licensed applicators, so it doesn't incorporate certain industries or certain factors of use. So if information is getting pulled from other places, I think that's great. But again, just sort of noting where those holes might be in that usage data.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, for the benefit of all attending, I referred to Taryn by her first name, and I think most of the people on this at this meeting know who she is, but I do want to identify her. She's Taryn Lascola Minor, and she's the division director of Crop and Pest Services at MDAR, and the pesticide program sits within her division.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Taryn, for those comments. Other commission comments, questions?
Commissioner, and with all due respect to MDAR, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's more of a general question, but we are talking uniquely about licensed pesticide applicators, right? In that this, given the expected exposure in the Commonwealth of glyphosate or expected use, is there any way for MDAR to opine on what percentage of that overall volume might be contributed from licensed applicators as opposed to residential consumer use? My understanding is that's a pretty big discrepancy between the two. Like, we might be talking about characterizing a very small set of data given the overwhelming potential use of glyphosate from folks that just go to Home Depot and purchase it and apply it. Is my understanding correct here? I'm just wondering if that might inform the discussion here, or how much priority we give this.
Mark, I believe you're accurate. I think the magnitude of what's being sold to the general public, who also may not apply the product appropriately to label directions as a licensed applicator would, also comes into play. I don't think we have, Taryn, I know we know, well, no, I won't say what we know. Taryn, could you provide some additional clarification here, please?
Sure. I think that's a great question, Mark, and I think it's a question that we would really like to know ourselves. I think we're kind of just going, I don't want to say on the assumption, but understanding that there's more homeowners out there that have access to more products than the licensed applicators do, that there is more use in that field than on a licensed applicator end. But we don't, at least the department anyways, doesn't collect that type of sales information. It's not required underneath our regulations, so we don't know how much is sold in the homeowner market. And I'm not sure how we would get that information. That would be something that we would have to discuss a little bit internally to try to drill down to see if there's any sort of information in other places that we could look to try to disseminate and parse out that.
Taryn, this is John, if I may add something, in the national report that we cited, national statistics, the category applied by consumers has the highest usage of any of the categories considered in that report, again, on a national scale. And this is from EPA's 2021 report.
Other comments? Let me just pose, while people are thinking, let me just pose one more question. I'm just brainstorming with you all a little bit here. Would it be possible maybe to take a limited set of that data, maybe the most recent year's reports, and Commissioner LeBeau, I think you said it was about 1,500 reports or something like that.
1,500 to 2,000.
So, worst case 2,000 that get filed by the applicators. And maybe, as you said, part of the issue is that it's product names, and so that will require somebody to evaluate whether or not those products contain glyphosate, and use that data to draw some conclusions. Where I'm going is I'm wondering whether it's possible to look at maybe a year's data, figure out how many products are being used that would, turn out to be, containing glyphosate. And even as we're using these other databases that I think ERG says it can make use with, but and if it turns out that in the process of ERG looking at that 1 year, and I realize there's probably a cost impact to spending time looking at these 2,000 reports, but seeing whether or not we get any sense of what percentage of the products, what percentage by volume in that 1 year might help inform the commission's thinking about that. And that's, I guess, one part of a question for DAR. Would it be would the last year of full data, whether it's 21, is that something that would be relatively easily accessible? And then secondly, ERG, I recognize this might be a little bit of a modification of the scope of work again, but is that something that ERG could undertake to sort of help the commission in its work? So I'll ask DAR first, and then I'll ask ERG. So,
well, this is one that I don't think I need to flip to Taryn. The current situation is we receive the reports, period. So to weigh through them would be a huge lift. And not that we are disagreeable to the intent of that suggestion, the impact of that suggestion on us. I'm not quite sure how we could make that happen. I will say that the 2021 reports are, I believe, they're available to be looked at. But I don't think MDR is in a situation to get into them and provide that summary. I mean, certainly if ERG wants to do it and acknowledging it may add to the scope, that's the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I was thinking that it was probably ERG we'd be asking, recognizing that, you know, there is time and effort associated with looking at 1 year's worth of data. ERG, can I ask your thoughts on that?
Sure. I just did some quick back of the envelope calculations. And I guess, again, I should first emphasize, we're more than happy to do this if it's something that the commission decides. But if I assumed 2,000 reports, roughly, and take someone 2 hours per report, which might be optimistic. I'm not sure how long these reports are. It's 4,000 hours. So if we put a junior analyst on this, it would more than double our budget. And if I'm doing the math correctly, that's looking at 2 full-time equivalents working for an entire year on this. Again, we're happy to do this if that's where the commission lands, but those are the implications of it.
2 hours for a report to see if it's one of those product names and how much was used?
Well, I think we would have to cross-reference it against the Kelly database. This is just my guess. Again, I've never seen some of these reports. And then we would have to be tracking in Excel. But even if I say 1 hour per report, it's close to doubling the budget, and it's 2 full-time equivalents for half a year.
Okay.
I don't know if someone from MDR could say if these are, you know, a 2-page report or a 20-page report. I have not seen these, so I can't comment on that.
Yeah, all I could comment to that is reports greatly vary in size depending on the individual business organization that's making the submission based on the volume of work they do. Taryn, could you, I mean, considering number of pages, I mean, are we talking to, you know, as little as 1 or 2 and as many as 20 or more?
As little as 1 and 2, I would say I wouldn't go as far as 20 or more pages, but you know, they could be substantial. I would say maybe 5 to 10 pages, and it depends on how many different services too the company offers. So if you've got a pest control company, you know, but they also, you know, they'll list, you know, things like rodenticides and insecticides. But if they're also incorporating, if they also provide a service for mosquito and tick, that's throwing in another different, like few, you know, that can throw in a few different more types of products on that list versus a lawn care company that just does lawn care. But if they do tree and shrubs, then you're expanding that list of products that they're using as well. So, so it does vary depending on the company as far as how large the, as far as the variability in the services that the company offers.
Okay, thank you for that. I am troubled, you know, the idea of doubling the size of the budget for what was designed to be a relatively limited amount of data, you know, doesn't, you know, seems problematic. Again, I'm, you know, I'm still, it seems like ERG is making the representation to us here that they do have data that will help understand how much of this material is being used in the Commonwealth. And apparently there's something there that talks about, you know, the different types of uses that, you know, when EPA does its analysis, it looks at it. So I see two hands up. I think Julie, your hand went up first.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was wondering if there, instead of reviewing all the reports, if maybe there was a way to do kind of a statistical subsample that might just give us an idea of that ballpark, comparison, that we could even hold that subsample up to what ERG is proposing with the kinetic database to see how that compares. So maybe instead of looking at 2,000 reports, we're looking at 100, assuming, that's still going to be 100 hours if it's averaged 1 hour per report. I don't think that, having filled out these reports myself, certainly on the small usage side, I can see some of them being pretty quick to go through and get into an Excel spreadsheet.
Thank you for that suggestion. Eve.
So I'm wondering if we were thinking about a single year's worth anyways. We're currently mid-September, and I don't know when these are due. There could be an opportunity, since this report is predicted to take 6-something months, to create some kind of, electronic form for this year's worth of applications. So for 2022, to gather the data so that you at least have a current year's worth of data. And then, as time allows, maybe you could do something similar to what Julie was suggesting to get some past year's worth of information. And I don't think it would be a big lift to do.
I'm a little concerned about that because we're already in the year, and I know from, our mutual work with the IPASS efforts, there is a bit of a lead time. I'm afraid for 2022, we wouldn't be able to get people to do it electronically. I just think there's, the people that are working on online reporting, they have actually a list of tasks. So it would be difficult, I think, to accomplish that for 2022.
I guess I was just wondering, I wasn't sure when those reports are due, and whether as simple as sending out to licensed applicators an Excel spreadsheet or a web form, which isn't necessarily difficult to put together to gather some of the basic data. It doesn't necessarily need to be the whole form. It could just be questions on the products and the usage amount. So just a thought.
Okay. So we have the thought, and John, I don't know if your team has an answer to when are the reports coming in sort of as the application goes. Is there a deadline by which reports have to be submitted for the previous activity year?
Taryn, I honestly don't know.
So, yeah, we usually send out or notify the applicators that it's annual usage report time, usually around January-ish, February, and we give folks, I believe, depending on when we can get the notice out, because we actually send out the hard copies as well. We send them the form. Depending on when those go out, we usually give them a couple months to submit them. So we should have everything in by like March or April of the following year that they're reporting. So the 2021 reports should have all been submitted by March or April of this year. And so we do have those all in.
Okay, thank you for that. I bet, yeah, the timing, again, I think is for 2022 makes it tough. It's, I know that's the direction DAR wants to go permanently, not only for this project, but for everything, but the timing's challenging. I'm wondering how commission members would feel if we went ahead with ERG's recommendation to use the databases that it's identified. However, if we could also maybe ask Ag and DEP folks to think further about Julie's idea about whether there's a subset of these reports we could look at, using a variety of again, I think they would need a little time to brainstorm and think how they would, how that could be done. And whether it's further engagement with the ERG in terms of an amendment, or whether it's something that folks might need to think about internally, but it seems like it's tough to tackle that here today. But again, I think a couple of the commission members have indicated that this might be helpful information to have for our deliberations, just to sort of ground truth, if you will, the other data that we're seeing.
Well, just as we're having this conversation, and also, considering our limitations, and but also what we could do, we could potentially, to some degree, for instance, a company that was just involved in structural pest control would unlikely, we might be able to filter out companies that we don't believe are in the, herbicide application business. And that could, obviously that would affect the number of reports. We could, cull them out, so to speak. And then if we were to, provide a subset, I think Julie threw out the number, I think it was Julie, 100.
Right.
At least we'd give 100 good ones. We wouldn't, among those 100, there wouldn't be, say, 10, 15, 20% of them as folks who simply don't even use glyphosate. So, we could work on that suggestion. We could work with DEP and ERG to see if we could come up with some solution in that regard.
Other comments? Okay, so I think what we're proposing is, again, authorizing ERG to proceed with the kinetic database, the EPA database, while folks, DEP, EPA, DEP, DAR, consider whether or not we can cull a subset, and think going forward how we can make use of that as part of the analysis, and bring it back to the commission at that point. But that allows ERG to begin using the data it can get to right now, which would be, again, helpful. Okay, so unless there's further discussion on that topic, the next topic is considering precedential judicial decisions. As noted by ERG, the project scope directed that precedential judicial decisions be considered. And at least one commenter expressed the view that the commission would be better served by considering scientific studies and reports rather than such decisions. ERG requested direction from the commission on this point. What consideration, if any, should be given to precedential judicial decisions? What kind of information, if any, would the commission seek or find useful from the consultant's review of such decisions? I'll go first on this one, but I don't mean to define the parameters of this particular area of discussion. But knowing that I think this was a topic of some import to the sponsors of the legislation creating this commission, I realized that I think it's wise for ERG to seek clarity of what we're looking for, and from my standpoint, I don't expect, I personally wouldn't expect ERG to be in the business of making or characterizing legal conclusions. But again, in these cases, that again, I think some of the commenters have indicated is worth looking at. you know, we know there were experts, and we know that these experts were relying on studies and information that helped inform their expert opinion. And I think it would be important, you know, to make sure that we are aware of what those studies were, particularly if they were, you know, used in that kind of public forum. And so, you know, from my standpoint, you know, I'm pretty sure, and I might, you know, I asked actually some of our folks at DEP to think about whether there are, you know, resources to summarize it. I realize this is an area of growing attention. There are a lot of cases in a lot of jurisdictions, but, you know, there might be resources that, you know, we could point ERG to again, make sure that while these cases either decided or many of which are still pending, if, you know, again, if the experts are relying on certain types of you know, scientific studies that we're aware of what those are. If it's all right, I might just ask here if commission members, you know, have views on this. I also see that Ravi Simon from Rep Gentile's office, you know, was asked for an opportunity to comment on this, but I will first ask the commission members if there are any thoughts you have on this topic.
Well, Commissioner, I know the Department of Public Health is very supportive of exactly the approach you've identified, to maybe not necessarily focus on the legal determination or the legal adjudication of these cases, but focus on the scientific weight of evidence that was presented at the cases and opine on really both sides that was presented. And to the extent it's new information that's not covered elsewhere in the report, that might provide something of value to the report. But to the extent there's already been an opinion offered through an authoritative agency or elsewhere on the particular issue, then that's important also to comment on the report. I think one of the comments that was submitted was to really identify how these legal cases are not adjudicated in the same way that a consensus opinion from career scientists may evaluate the information. And I think that point alone would be an important concept to maybe present in a report on fundamentally the differences in an approach of a rigorous scientific review versus a case that's presented to a jury.
Mm-hmm. Other comments?
Yeah, Commissioner, I mean, like many on this commission and those in attendance, I mean, we always want to rely on the science. So science that might be included in a court case may be of value. I think we all know, I mean, you know, a court case, attorneys are presenting what supports their position and trending away from that which doesn't. So we want to stick to the science, and the science included is different than the arguments being made. And truthfully, with all due respect to juries and judges, the decisions that are made are, you know, from folks who are not necessarily knowledgeable of the subject matter at hand in any kind of scientific fashion. But I would want to ask, because there's, as been alluded to, there's numerous cases out there. And this might be just my ignorance, you know, what kind of availability is there to get that kind of info? You know, how easy or difficult might that be? And if it's easy, I mean, what's the volume that would have to be examined?
Yeah, in a moment, I might ask, you know, again, we asked Benny Misholam of our Office of General Counsel to do some, you know, just preliminary work to see what's out there. Because, you know, clearly ERG is going to want to be able to look at this information easily and you know, make sure that it's accessible. But before we turn to him, I just want to see if there are other commission member comments. Okay, not hearing any. Before I turn to you, Benny, I know we got a hand up on this. I'm going to take this, moment to recognize Ravi Simon from Rep Gentile's office for a comment. And then, like I said, I'm going to tell you some of the resources we've been trying to identify. So Ravi, if the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much. Ravi Simon from Carmen Gentile's office. Thanks everyone for all of your hard work on this. Rep Gentile actually couldn't make it today, but he asked me to just provide a quick update, which, my comment isn't actually on the legal cases. It's more relevant to the prior topic that all of you were discussing. But the legislature is considering a supplemental budget for next month. I just wanted to provide a quick update that our office made a request for an additional $117,000 of funding for the commission. Of course, there's no guarantees, but we're hopeful that this might be included in the supplemental budget in the House, and we're currently looking for a Senate sponsor for a similar measure on their side.
Terrific. We, thank you very much for that update, and thank you and to the representative for, the support for the commission. As you, as you've seen, we're trying to move ahead and, and make sure that we're not delaying doing this work. And in the meantime, that kind of support to make sure that, we're covered as we move forward with this study is very much appreciated.
Of course, thanks. And please reach out. We're going to continue to advocate to make sure that the commission has the resources that it needs to do its work.
Thank you very much. And thanks again to the representative as well. Benny Michellam, who has been with the commission and updating us on various topics that we as a commission need to know about. But again, I asked him earlier this week, not giving him a lot of time, but whether or not he, in terms of answering ERG's question about how are there places you can go to figure out, what the cases are and what the parties are relying on in terms of technical information. Anything you have to offer to this conversation, Benny, would be appreciated.
Sure. I'll just take, a minute. There, as folks likely know, the litigation has been, quite significant in this area. By one count, I saw over 100,000 cases. Obviously, some settlements that will sometimes sort of address thousands or tens of thousands of cases at a time. And I think typically what I've been able to find so far, and this isn't to say, it hasn't been an exhaustive search, but of, the many organizations and sort of websites that have been tracking litigation seem to focus a lot on what the actual monetary awards have been, which sometimes have been, quite significant. So I think there is some tracking and sort of attention on that. I have not yet seen, although it may exist, or there may be a law review article or something like that, or note, something that sort of summarizes perhaps either some of the science that's been used, or maybe if there are experts that sort of consistently are being leaned on by one side or another at these trials. But I have not seen. So it's really been much more on the actual kind of ultimate outcome, and not as much on the science. I can continue looking, and obviously I'm happy to share whatever I find with ERG, but that's been sort of where these different, I hesitate to call them databases, but sort of different websites have sort of pointed in the direction of.
Okay. Thank you for that, Benny. And like I said, I on the growing list of issues I asked Benny about. I added this one recently because I knew we were going to be talking about this. You know, I guess, you know, my view, and, you know, reflecting what Mark said and John said, you know, again, I guess I'd like to offer this, that, you know, again, what we're looking for is the scientific data, because again, we're being tasked to make health effects. We're not, you know, just making sure that we have as good a handle as we can on the scientific information being used by people that are looking at this issue. And so I guess what I'd like to, you know, propose is that ERG, you know, again, you know, make some effort, and you know, as you know, Benny's indicated, DEP is willing to keep looking at significant cases. This is also something that ERG can ask the stakeholders and commenters about. You know, what are the cases where, you know, they thought that there was a particularly important study, expert data relied upon. And again, you know, we're not looking for a, you know, a detailed characterization of what Benny's described as tens of thousands of cases, but in the course of your information, if a commenter wanted to offer information about that, and you know, there were studies that, you know, ERG would you know work to obtain that study and make that part of the data that we're looking at. And again, if you know, if those of us in the state are able to come up with a resource that might make it easier to find out what that is, we would also provide that to you. How does that sound to the commission members?
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds good with me as well. I was just wondering if, I mean, I know ERG put it in its letter to ask us what we thought, but I'm wondering if ERG has any thoughts about what it might do, or, you know, how it sees the matter of looking at judicial decisions.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question of clarification first, and I get frustrated when people ask questions in response to a question I ask them, but I think this is important. For these judicial decisions, I've heard you talk about the need to focus on underlying scientific information, and I fully support that. I just wonder if you are talking about published, peer-reviewed, publicly available scientific information, or I think in some of these cases, experts may present information that's in the unpublished realm. So I just wanted to ask that first, if we're using the precedential decisions to hopefully identify additional published, publicly available, peer-reviewed information.
You know, I'll go first and say, you know, I would assume that ERG would you know, note that in its analysis, you know, what is published, you know, peer-reviewed versus, you know, material that was, you know, presented, that maybe didn't have those you know, that you couldn't make that statement for. You know, again, it just, you know, what I'm thinking is that, you know, we're probably going to hear from some commenters that are aware of some litigation. And again, the task of the group is to make sure we're getting the best science. So if you know, you're getting studies that have, you know, high indicia of, you know, reliability, then, you know, obviously we'd want to make sure that we were using that. If there are things that are more contested, or, you know, not that, you know, maybe don't meet that criteria, you know, we would obviously, you know, expect that, you know, that would be called out. I don't know if that's any help to you or not.
It is, yeah. And I can see, you know, just reflecting on what we did for phase one, we have an attorney in-house who searched on a software platform that gathers information on legal cases. And we put some information in the phase 1 report about what she found, but consistent with what Benny said, it was high level details about a case, and it didn't really dive into who the experts were, what were their underlying scientific arguments, and so on. Now, those details might actually be in the software platform, and we just didn't drill down far enough. So that would be one of the avenues we take to see if we could find more information. I like the suggestion. I can't remember which commission member said it about this could be a question that we include in our outreach to the stakeholders for the public input on phase 2, about some details that we ask them to provide information on if they have it. And I do appreciate what Benny was saying also, that he might be able to offer some additional details based on his research. So it's through those avenues that we'd see what we can get from the judicial decisions. To a certain extent, I'd like to think they rely on the same set of published peer-reviewed information and perhaps reach different opinions on that same information. I do get a little nervous about what might be presented in cases that's not publicly available and that we can't thoroughly vet on our own, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
I appreciate those comments, and yeah, I think what you're talking about, and I'm definitely, I think we should be asking this when we're talking to commenters and stakeholders, because again, these are the people that will presumably be able to direct our attention to those kinds of studies. And the type of due diligence you're talking about, again, and we'll see what we find is, maybe we have a little more time here in the Commonwealth to think about it, we would provide. But I think that's the level of what we're looking for. Again, we're looking for the scientific information that these tribunals are relying on. Any other comments on that?
Well, just my response to John's question. This time it's a response, John, and not a question. I would just simply submit that we would think that the same science, the same criteria should be followed that's used for scientific reports outside of judicial proceedings. I think it should be, exactly the same set of criteria.
I agree.
And I think John was making that point, something that's not peer reviewed, or where, that we don't really have access, to all of the information, that's going to be more difficult for the commission to use than things that, are published and available. But nevertheless, the fact that we're engaging with people that might know about these possible sources of information, I think is important. Any other comments on that? Okay, thank you. I know we're each of these topics has generated a lot of discussion. We're over an hour already, but I think this has been very valuable, and I think we have one more topic that if we could cover, and it's inert ingredients. Several commenters suggested that the commission evaluate the effects not only of glyphosate, but also inert ingredients. As noted by ERG, its original scope of work requests evaluation of human health and environmental impacts of glyphosate. ERG recommends that it focus on glyphosate, but in the phase 2 report, summarize readily available information on inert ingredients and their toxicities. Does ERG have anything else you want to supplement that recommendation with?
Yeah, I'll add here that this was a tricky one for us, because in the realm of the so-called inert ingredients, there are some that are known, there are many that are not. And we are aware of some publications in recent years about the relative toxicity of glyphosate versus some of the so-called inert ingredients. And we can summarize that information, but it very well could be a small subset of the universe of inert ingredients. But if we are compiling the literature on glyphosate toxicity, some of those publications will come into play. So we can have a small part of the report address what we found in that regard. But I do think our focus should be on glyphosate, just to be true to the original scope of work. And I'm not sure if the ultimate recipients or users of this report, the pesticide subcommittee, might have an opinion of their own about what they want to see on this.
Commissioner, if I may follow up.
Yes.
You know, to the point, to the points that John was alluding to, you know, from a structural organizational perspective, the purpose of our review is to send to the pesticide board subcommittee information so that they can use it when making a registration decision regarding products containing glyphosate. And I just want to inform, and forgive me, folks may already know this, but I want to make sure folks know this, that the pesticide board subcommittee only considers active ingredients when registering products. It does not consider inert ingredients. And then, you know, we've spoken previously that there are, you know, one doesn't go to a store and buy a container of glyphosate. One buys a particular product that has glyphosate in as an ingredient, and those products, each or all, may have different combinations of inert ingredients contained within them. I'm uncertain, or I think it may be unlikely that the ERG will be able to summarize information on all of them. And I tend to question if this is a good use of the resources, given that the subcommittee will not include them in its considerations.
Thank you for that comment, John. And just going back to ERG's recommendation, you know, it sounds like they're saying that it's, you know, it's recommending evaluating glyphosate, but making readily available information available on inert ingredients. So that suggests that it's not going to be the main analytical focus. However, as part of its efforts, while it's doing its research, it will list, you know, available studies. Does that are you suggesting an amendment to that approach?
I'm not suggesting an amendment at this point in time. I'm simply commenting that if information was sent to the pesticide board subcommittee relative to inerts, I don't think, I shouldn't say I don't think, they don't consider inerts. They consider the active ingredients. So I understand there are a lot of individuals who want to know a lot more about inerts for a lot of different reasons. But for the purposes of this review, I'm questioning why, or, you know, why we would devote resources to consideration of inerts.
Okay, other commission comments?
Well, Commissioner, you know, to follow up on that and really kind of raise up what Commissioner LeBeau is saying, confirm, I think, what John Wilhelmi is recommending. I do think in terms of structure, the report, it would be really helpful if the phase 2 report was structured in a way to meet the literal requirements of an individual review for the pesticide board subcommittee, because that is the charge in front of us. And I think Commissioner LeBeau is raising a really good point, and it's one that I think John was raising too, that to the extent anything is outside of the scope of that individual review, I think it will make it very confusing to the pesticide board subcommittee as a member, I'm saying that would make it confusing to me on how I should consider that other information within an established process. So I think this inert question is one that does sound like it's outside of the scope of an individual review for an active ingredient, similar to other individual reviews that have been done, or information that the Pesticide Board Subcommittee has been asked to review. But I do think it raises the larger question of just structure and format of the phase 2 report, to just keep in mind it should be consistent with the requirements of an individual review, because it will be presented to the subcommittee to adjudicate on its findings. And the phase 2 report should make an unambiguous distinction or recommendation to the pesticide subcommittee on glyphosate. And I think the inert ingredients may make that a confusing distinction.
Okay, thank you for that. Other comments? Okay, then not hearing any, it sounds like based on the input that we've had from John and Mark, that, you know, it is a glyphosate review. And it sounds, I'm just going to ask the two commission members here again. You know, I think there's agreement that you know, the report should be focused on glyphosate as the topic to be studied. Is it, you know, are you recommending that, you know, the information that they come across on the inerts that might be used in these products is better set aside, or better not addressed at all in this report?
To fulfill our charge, I don't think inerts are relevant to the charge itself. So I do
Focus
not.
on glyphosate. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Julie?
I agree with the other members of the commission. I do want us to reflect also that part of the phase 2 report was also to consider the most common alternatives. And we had thought about that a little bit, of that scope of when evaluating glyphosate products, thinking about alternatives and also uses like tank mixes. So I would say I agree that the focus should be in on glyphosate, but if there's a way to capture some of the impacts, maybe it's just compiling you know, what literature reflects on these inert ingredients, that's captured during this process. But again, having the main focus remain on glyphosate, as the other commissioners have mentioned. I don't know if that muddies the waters more or not, but
No, I kind of think, and I might ask John in a moment, but I kind of think that's what his recommendation was, that the report focus on glyphosate, but as an appendix, if, you know, they want to list readily available information on inerts. Is that what you had in mind, John?
We can do that, yes. And, you know, recognizing that whatever we present maybe a small fraction, represent a small fraction of the universe of inerts.
Well, let me ask you what you did recommend. I don't mean to mischaracterize what you recommended. This is a good opportunity for you with the commission here. How would you, you know, it sounds like, you know, you're recommending focusing on glyphosate. So how would you finish the sentence for us, if you will?
Yeah, well, I'll give you two answers. So the first is what we wrote in the letter, which was reflecting on the public comments, presented an option of what we could do, which was basically what Julie just stated, that keep the report focused on glyphosate, but maybe have an appendix that lists some literature that we came across that talks about inerts. The other answer is, you know, upon hearing the input from Commissioner LeBeau and Dr. Nascarella, is that we leave it out altogether. And I do think spending time on the so-called inerts would ultimately take away resources from what our focus should be, which is glyphosate. So I think in hearing those comments, I'm more in that boat of just having us focus on glyphosate alone.
Any commission reactions? But okay, hearing nothing further, it sounds like well, let me just make sure that the commission, if again, one of the concerns you've identified, John, is that you wouldn't be able to do a complete job on inerts and having some information in the appendix without you'd have to put a bunch of qualifiers. And so is the commission comfortable with the focus is on glyphosates because that's what the legislative charge was? Okay, not hearing any objection, then that's again, when we go through this, and we're about to come to this, and that was the last of the major topics. So we're going to move to the next part of the agenda, which is completing phase one. Report that considers we're asking after this meeting, ERG has proposed that it will submit a final phase one that considers the clarifications and recommendations and that reflect the input of the commission. I might ask in a moment ERG to make sure that I've completely captured this, but on public comment, I think what we talked about was the recommendations of the commission. In addition to those offered by ERG, was that there is a significant effort to reach back out to stakeholders and commenters, the original stakeholders and those identified by public comment during the phase one process, to let them know that phase two is underway and that they're going to be invited to and encouraged to participate. Secondly, that phase two would consider, while it's not would consider major themes heard during the comments, not an individual comment by comment response, but that the phase two would address major areas of comment, even while including all of the comments as an appendix to the phase two report. On annual usage data, I think we agreed with ERG's recommendations, but a subgroup of DEP and DAR will work to see whether or not we can get a subset of some of the DAR reports to see if we can use that in our deliberations. That's work that's not on ERG, but that's work that we'll consider. And if there is something that moves forward, we would advise the commission on how to do that. Is there some way to mine the data in a reasonable way that would allow this work to be used by ERG? On considering precedential judicial decisions, I think the commission made clear that we are interested in the scientific studies that are used in these. We strongly encourage ERG to ask public commenters if they're aware of studies that are used in litigation. ERG has its own efforts to mine the data that might give us information about particularly public scientific information that might be used in these proceedings. DEP will continue to take a look and see if there are other data sources that might be helpful to ERG in this. And then in inert ingredients, the recommendation was that the focus be on glyphosate because that's the charge of the commission. So John Wilhelmi, are there any other modifications that you heard that you'd like to highlight before I ask for a vote on formally accepting the phase one report with those addendums?
I don't. That sounded like a faithful summary to me.
Okay, so with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to formally accept phase one with the commission corrections and comments identified.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Eve. So I'm going to go ahead and call the roll. Commissioner LeBeau.
Aye.
Mark Nascarella.
Aye.
Eve Schlater.
Aye.
Julie Richburg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So thank you very much. Phase one will be is accepted. Those reports will be made. ERG will write up the modified phase one report, and we will publish it on our website so that it's available to the public and stakeholders. So the next issue I'd like to cover is the ERG contract extension. As discussed at the last meeting, we had about 24,000 from the original appropriation that is available. Both MassDEP and DIR have been looking for other sources of funding to complete the project. At this point, I believe I might defer to DAR because I think without putting words in Commissioner LeBeau's mouth, I think we have a path forward for phase two, but I might defer. I might defer to Commissioner LeBeau and for that particular update.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have the funds and we're ready to execute once the commission agrees to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I will note that ERG did provide a letter to Ag about making, at the June meeting, we did ask for additional tasks to, be specifically called out, reviewing public input submitted. ERG will need to review and consider public comments submitted on the phase two report. And so that was work that was not identified in our original scope. I believe this is translated into, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I'm reading from your letter, so I hope I'm not about $8,719 in additional costs.
Correct.
And again, I think that reflects the commission's desire to make sure that there is an opportunity for public comment and those comments are considered. So, with that, I would, in order for ERG to move forward with its phase two work, we will need to execute a contract amendment, and DAR has been diligent in working on those issues. I'd like to say with DEP support, but we appreciate the work of DAR in terms of making sure the vehicle can move forward. So I'd like to propose a draft motion, or I guess it is a motion, to ask DAR to execute an amendment to its contract with ERG, obligating ERG to proceed with the phase two work and update any relevant scope and work and project timeline. The timeline now is 6 months from the date of execution. And this reflects the additional work in terms of considering public comment on the draft phase two report as appropriate, and to direct MassDEP and DAR to identify and make the funds available to support this ERG contract within the constraints on agency funding, while pursuing additional legislative appropriation for the commission's work. So, basically we're moving ahead. We're using existing funding, even as we try to find legislative funding to, if you will, replenish those accounts that we're using to be able to move forward right now with a 6-month completion timeline. Can I get a motion to, or can I get a motion for a vote on my motion to accept the contract amendment and authorization?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Not hearing any. I will now call the roll. John LeBeau,
Aye.
Mark Nascarella,
Aye.
Eve Schloiter,
Aye.
Julie Richburg,
Aye.
and the chair votes yes. So with that, I thank you very much. I think we're on a good course now. I think the discussion we've had, both with respect to phase one and the improvements, I think, with respect to phase two and the clarification of some of the areas where we received a great deal of public comment, will make sure that we have a a thorough and robust phase 2 analysis that the commission will be able to work on when it's completed. So I want to thank you for that. I will pause here to ask if there's any public comment, anything that anybody would like to, any members of the public would like to offer at this time. Please put your hand up and Paul Locke will unmute you.
I
Paul
do
Locke,
not see any hands raised.
Yeah, no,
okay. Yeah, in that case, any other business that the commission would like to bring, any commission member would like to bring up at this time? If not, I know we went a little longer than our hour, but I feel like it was really important that we have this, get clarity on these discussions, given the importance of the topic we're talking about. I really want to thank the commission members for their time and attention. And I would very much like to thank ERG. I would like to thank DAR staff and DEP staff. There were a number of people that have been working on making sure that the contracting elements and, the funding elements and, the logistics of making sure that we would be in a position to be able to support this work are underway. And I'd like to thank all of those individuals. You see some of their names on the screen, but there are more that were involved in this. So thank you to all of the teams. And without any other issues, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I guess I'll second it. I second it. We'll take a vote. John LeBeau,
Aye.
Mark Nascarella,
Aye.
Eve Schloiter,
Aye.
Julie Richburg.
Aye.
Once again, thank you all very much. And we will stay in touch as this phase 2 moves forward. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. Have a good day.